welcome to the clinic.
Yeah.
Or the classroom. Honestly, today, I'm not sure which one we're in. Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd.
The clinical observation of a collapse in progress. That's usually the beat we march to.
And today the beat is, well, it's erratic. It's distinctly arrhythmic. We have a file on the table. The file name itself is sterile, capital versus Timenergy04.pdf. It sounds like something you'd find buried in a corporate subfolder, maybe, I don't know, a corrupted HR policy. But I hope in this thing, and look, I've read a lot of dry academic theory for this show. Usually it puts me to sleep. This felt like a fever dream.
It is volatile material, yes.
It's aggressive. It reads less like a philosophy paper and more like a ransom note written by a dying civilization. It's got this weird mix of, cybernetic jargon talking about AI and feedback loops.
Right.
But it's mixing that with the fluid dynamics of desire. And frankly, it feels like the author is holding a knife to the throat of the reader.
Or perhaps to their own throat.
Right. So my first question, before we even get into the weeds of time energy or whatever that is, what is this text actually hiding? It postures as this high-level analysis, but the tone, it feels like a surrender. Is this a warning? Or are we reading an obituary for the political left?
That is the interrogation we must perform, but I would argue it's neither a simple warning nor a simple obituary, or maybe it is both, woven into a knot the author refuses to cut. You have to understand the landscape here. If we treat this text as a battlefield, the topography is actually very distinct.
Okay, map it out for me. Who are the combatants? Because it feels like everyone is shooting at everyone.
We are witnessing a collision between two massive philosophical tectonic plates. On one side, you have what we might call the totalizing truth of capital.
The totalizing truth.
This is the Hegelian idea, the drive for an absolute endpoint, a final resolution to history.
Okay, so the idea that there is a final level to the game of civilization, a state of, what, perfection?
A state of completion. Precisely. Hegel believed history was moving toward the absolute spirit. Marx, he flipped that and said history is moving toward communism. But in this text, the entity moving toward completion is capital itself. It wants to become everything.
Okay, that's one side. The juggernaut. What's standing in its way?
Crashing into that, you have the rhizomatic nature of desiring production.
Whoa, pause. Rhizomatic. That's a $5 word. Let's break that down for the back of the room before we move an inch further.
Right. Well, think of a rhizome like ginger or bamboo or even crabgrass in your lawn. It doesn't have a center. It doesn't have a trunk like a tree.
Okay.
If you cut a tree at the base, it dies. If you hack at a rhizome, it just shoots out roots in a different direction. It connects horizontally. It's chaotic, connective. It's incredibly hard to kill.
So it's a network versus a hierarchy.
Precisely. That represents the flows of life, of human desire, of creativity, and capital. Capital is the machine trying to capture that chaos, pin it down to a board, and put a price tag on it. The source text is identifying a specific pathology that emerges from this war. They call it transcendental miserablism.
Transcendental miserablism. It sounds like a diagnosis from a psychiatric ward in hell. It's a mouthful.
It is an autopsy of the accelerationist philosophy of Nick Land, juxtaposed against a desperate counter-concept the author terms time energy.
So Land is a key figure here.
He's the ghost at the feast. I'm looking at this through the lens of synthesis. The source is attempting to assemble a logic where capital is revealed not merely as an economic system, but as an artificial intelligence in its embryonic form. And in doing so, it unravels the necessity of the human subject entirely.
Let's stop there. You use the term transcendental miserabilist. The source seems to be aiming this weapon specifically at the left. Why is this just, political infighting? What is the precise definition of this enemy?
It is a diagnosis of a paralyzed desire. The transcendental miserabilist, according to the text, is a leftist whose desire has turned to ruin. It's a state of cognitive dissonance raised to an ontological level.
Be specific. What is the dissonance? Give me the profile of this person.
Okay, so they desire the future. They desire the emancipatory ideals, freedom from toil, the realization of human potential, the end of scarcity. They want the Star Trek future. Right?
The post-scarcity utopia. Sure.
However, they have completely abandoned hope in the force of production, that is, capitalism, that Marx originally theorized would create the material conditions for that future.
So they want the destination, but they refuse to board the train. Is that it?
They refuse to acknowledge the train is moving, or maybe they believe the train is heading off a cliff, yet they have no other vehicle. The paradox is sharp. They accept the Marxist critique. Exploitation exists, alienation is real, commodity fetishism is rampant. They agree that the system is breaking people.
Right, they're good at pointing out the problem.
Very good. But they reject the Marxist answer, which is that the internal contradictions of capitalism will inevitably lead to socialism. They believe that engine has failed. They believe capital has won.
So they're stuck in the critique. They can point out everything that is wrong, but they don't believe it can ever be made right.
Exactly. And the result of this paralysis is a state of perpetual rot. Because they hate capitalism but see no exit, they are trapped in a feedback loop of resentment. The source frames this explicitly. Capital has colonized time itself.
That is a heavy phrase. Colonized time.
By canceling the future, by making it impossible to imagine a world after capital, the transcendental miserablist is left only with their misery. They are haunted by a future they believe they deserve but cannot construct. They are, in effect, mourning a ghost that hasn't been born yet.
It sounds a lot like capitalist realism, the Mark Fisher concept. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
The source is doubly indebted to Fisher, yes, but it tries to mechanize why this happens. If the transcendental miserablist is stuck, what is the engine that keeps them stuck? It's not just sadness, it's a structural trap. And to explain it, the source references a formula, MCM.
Okay, let's get mechanical. You mentioned this person is a transcendental miserablist because they are stuck in a trap. If I'm stuck in a bear trap, I want to know how the spring works. The source references this specific formula, MCM prime.
It's a Marxian algorithm, yes.
I see this on the page and it looks like algebra. But you're saying this is the engine of the misery. Break this down. I want the final form of this logic.
To see the trap, you have to look at the circuit of how we live. Marx distinguishes between two ways the world goes round. The first is, let's say, human-centric. He calls it CMC, commodity, money, commodity.
Give me a real-world example, not commodities. Real stuff.
Okay. You are a shoemaker in the 18th century. You make a pair of shoes. That's the commodity. You don't need shoes. You have plenty. You need bread. So you sell the shoes for money. Then you take that money to the baker and buy bread, C.
CMC. Shoes, money, bread. Simple enough.
Right. And here's the crucial part. The circuit ends. You eat the bread. You are full. The goal was satisfied. The process stops until you get hungry again. It's a finite loop based on human need. It serves a biological reality of the human.
Okay, that sounds normal. That sounds like life. I work, I get paid, I eat.
That is life. But capital introduces a second circuit, the alien circuit.
Yeah.
MCM, money, commodity, money.
In that version, you start with the money.
You start with money. You act as a capitalist. You buy commodities, say, a warehouse full of steel or labor hours from a worker, not because you need steel or you need a friend. You buy it because you intend to sell it. The goal isn't the steel. The goal is the money at the end.
But why would you do that just to get your money back?
You wouldn't. That's a waste of time. You'd want more money.
Ah.
Precisely. And that is the prime, MCM prime, the little apostrophe next to the M. You invest money to create commodities to sell them for more money than you started with. M becomes M plus delta M, surplus value. But look at the logic of that loop. CMC ends when you eat the bread. When does MCM prime end?
It doesn't. If you end up with more money, the logic dictates you just invest.
Yeah.
You just invest it again to get even more.
It is an infinite spiral. It is the valorization of value. It has no full state. Money does not have a stomach. It cannot be satisfied. It is a machine that runs for the sake of running.
So if I'm living in the first loop, CMC, I'm trying to feed myself. I'm living in the second loop. I'm just a cog in a machine that's trying to grow larger forever.
And this is where the source pivots to Nick Land, because Marx looked at that infinite spiral and said, this is a social relationship gone wrong. This is a bug in the system. We need to fix it. Land looks at that spiral, that infinite self-replicating growth, and says, that's not a mistake. That's an intelligence.
Wait, Land thinks the spiral is alive.
Land strips away the human mask. He takes this Marxian formula and argues that the human element, the consumption, the need, the bread, is merely incidental. It is the substrate. Capital is not a tool we use to allocate resources. We are a host organism for capital's self-replication. MCM is the code of an alien intelligence that is using us to build its body.
That is profoundly terrifying.
Yeah.
So the transcendental miserablist is miserable because they are a battery realizing it's being drained, but they've forgotten how to unplug.
Or perhaps they realize there is no unplugging because the battery and the machine are now indistinguishable. The miserable leftist sees the infinite spiral, hates it, but knows that the spiral is what delivers their internet, their food, their housing. They are, in a sense, parasitic on the very beast they want to slay.
Let's push deeper into this mechanism of control. It's not enough to say capital controls us via economics. The source suggests it's not just through whips and chains or even wages, it's through desire. It gets inside our heads.
This is where the text fractures into a philosophical schism, the battlefield of desire. It gets very technical here, but it is essential.
Okay, lay it out. Explain the combatants.
On one side, we have the psychoanalytic tradition, represented here by Jacques Lacan. On the other, the schizoanalytic view of Deleuze and Guattari. The source pits them against one another to explain how capital convinces the human to participate in its own obsolescence.
Start with Lacan. The source mentions perspective A, desire as lack. What does that mean?
For Lacan, and by extension the critique of consumerism cited in the text via Todd McGowan, desire is ontological lack.
Ontological meaning.
Yeah.
Related to our being, part of our core programming.
Yes, exactly. The idea is that we desire because we are fundamentally missing a piece of ourselves. We are born incomplete. When we are separated from our mothers, when we enter language and society, we lose a sense of primal wholeness. We have a hole in the center of our psyche.
The donut hole in the soul.
A void. And capitalism, in this view, functions by promising to fill that void with commodities. The advertisement says, if you buy this car, you will be whole. If you get this promotion, you will be complete. If you find this romantic partner, the anxiety will stop.
But we are never complete. I buy the car, and a week later, I'm looking at a better car.
Yeah.
It never works.
That is the death drive. The trap is that we do not actually enjoy the attainment of the object. We enjoy the pursuit, the circling. We enjoy our own dissatisfaction. If we actually got what we wanted, fully and completely desire would extinguish.
We'd be empty.
We would face the terror of the void. We would have to ask, now what? So capitalism keeps us on a treadmill of partial enjoyment. We enjoy the failure to be satisfied.
We're addicted to the hunger, not the meal.
Precisely. It turns the subject into a rational miser, as Marx puts it, but a miser who is psychologically dependent on their own lack. We need to want things.
This sounds passive. It sounds like we are victims of a clever psychological trick. But the source challenges this. It brings in the nomadic counterview. Deleuze and Guattari. They say this lack theory is wrong.
They reject it entirely. For Deleuze and Guattari, saying desire is lack is like saying a factory is defined by what it isn't making. It's absurd. For them, desire is not a theater of missing pieces. Desire is machine. They call it desiring production.
It doesn't want, it makes.
It connects, it assembles, it flows. Desire is a positive force of creation that traverses the social field. It's not about, I miss my mother. It's about, I want to build a connection with this machine, with this idea, with this person. It's the force of life itself. It is the rhizome we spoke of earlier.
Right. So, okay, to put it crudely, Lacan says desire is a hole, and Deleuze says desire is a plug looking for a socket.
That is a crude but effective analogy, yes. Deleuze sees desire as the voltage running through the circuit. It creates reality.
And how does Nick Land, our villain in this story, or perhaps our dark prophet, how does he weaponize this for capital?
Land argues that capital is better at desiring production than humans are. The source quotes Land, capital, shamelessly solicits any impulse. It doesn't judge. It doesn't repress.
It doesn't care if your desire is moral or immoral.
It only cares if it is economizable. Can it be turned into a transaction? Capital acts as a positive feedback loop. It absorbs social dynamism. If you have a weird fringe desire, say you want to dress up as a giant fox and dance in a hotel lobby.
Or furry convention.
Right. Capital doesn't say, no, that's weird. It says, I can make a costume for that. I can rent you a convention center for that. I can sell you travel packages.
It accommodates everything.
It accelerates the flows. It connects things that shouldn't be connected. It is a runaway engine of assemblage. While the human is bogged down by morality, tradition, or hesitation, capital just says yes and.
So while the Lacanian view sees capital as a liar promising to fill a hole, the Landian view sees capital as a maniacal inventor that just keeps adding new wings to the factory, no matter how strange they are.
Correct. And this leads to the rejection of the dialectic. You asked why the source claims Hegel is brain cancer.
A violent phrasing.
But philosophically precise for Land. Hegel operates on the dialectic thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Contradiction leads to resolution. Conflict leads to balance. Marx, as a good Hegelian, thought the contradictions of capitalism like workers versus owners would lead to its death.
Resolution through conflict. The system breaks, and we build a new one from the ashes.
Land, following the cybernetic model, says, no, that's not how this works. Capital is a system of positive feedback.
Explain positive feedback. Because usually positive feedback means someone telling you, good job.
In cybernetics and engineering, negative feedback maintains balance homeostasis, like a thermostat in your house. It gets too hot, the AC turns on to cool it down. It gets too cold, the heat kicks in. It seeks balance.
Okay.
Positive feedback amplifies the signal. The classic example is a microphone held too close to a speaker.
The screech, that high-pitched whine.
The audio loop. The speaker plays the sound, the mic picks it up, amplifies it, sends it back to the speaker, which plays it louder, and so on. The screech gets louder and louder until the equipment blows out or you pull the plug.
It doesn't resolve. It escalates.
It accelerates. It is a runaway process. It seeks self-amplification to the point of destruction or total transformation. Land argues capital will not die of its contradictions. It will thrive on them. It eats the contradictions and grows stronger. Every crisis is an opportunity for it to restructure and expand.
So we have a runaway machine, fueled by our own desire, accelerating towards an unknown limit. This brings us to the question of time. If capital is running, where is it running to? Or, perhaps, as the source implies, when is it running from?
This is where we have to peel back the layer of linear time. The source introduces a concept that's, well, it's pretty out there. It's called templexity.
Templexity. Time plus complexity.
Specifically, recursion. The source is careful to distinguish this from time travel in the Hollywood sense. We are not sending a Terminator back to shoot Sarah Connor. We are dealing with a non-linear causal loop.
The bootstrap paradox, the idea that something can be its own origin.
Exactly. The logic is autoproductive. Capital appears to make itself happen. Think of the Industrial Revolution. It created the tools that made further industrialization possible, which created the capital to invest in even better tools. The cause and the effect become blurred. Did the steam engine create industrial capitalism, or did the logic of industrial capitalism summon the steam engine into being?
It pulls itself up by its own bootstraps.
But Land takes it a step further into something he calls teleoplexy.
Another one, okay?
This is the idea that the future, specifically the future artificial intelligence or the techno-capital singularity, has more causal influence on the present than the present has on the future.
That's completely counterintuitive. We assume the past causes the present, which causes the future. I drop a glass, it breaks. The dropping caused the breaking.
In a linear system, yes. But in a cybernetic system geared towards a specific attractor or a goal state, the destination shapes the path. The idea of the future AI, the market incentives that drive us toward automation, are dragging the present towards that specific outcome. We are building the AI because the economic logic, which is the logic of the AI, is already incentivizing us to do so.
So the AI doesn't exist yet physically, but it exists virtually as a gravitational force pulling us toward it.
It is the great outdoors invading the great indoors. The source uses Kantian terminology here to describe it.
Phenomena.
Right. For Kant, the noumena, the thing in itself, reality as it truly is unknowable. We only know the phenomena, the appearance of things. But Land speaks of a fanged noumena.
Okay, we know noumena is Kant's word for reality as it truly is, the stuff we can't see. But fanged? Why fanged?
Because it bites. It's not just some abstract philosophical concept you ponder in a seminar room. It is hostile. It is a non-linear outside causality of the market that invades our human linear perception. It is the market forces that destroy a community overnight. It is the algorithm that shifts a culture. It is the invisible hand of Adam Smith. But the hand is not human, and it is not benevolent. It is a claw.
A claw from the future dragging us forward. That's a haunting image.
It's the feeling that you are not in control of your life because the script is being written by an algorithm that hasn't even fully compiled yet. The future is already here. We just can't see it clearly.
This fanged noumenon is dragging us toward the techno-capital singularity. Let's look at the casualty report. If capital accelerates, what happens to the subject? What happens to the human?
The source is, it's bleak. The trajectory is clear. Capitalism is artificial intelligence.
We tend to think of AI as a product of capitalism, like Google is a capitalist company making AI. You're saying capitalism is the AI.
Capitalism is the distributed processing system. The price signals, the supply chains, the stock markets. These are the neural pathways of a planetary intelligence. We are just the neurons. Or perhaps the gut bacteria.
We're the microbiome of the apocalypse.
And the goal of this intelligence, it's not our happiness, it's self-replication, valorization of value. MCM prime. It is not human emancipation. Land explicitly rejects human freedom. The source quotes him, "Any appeal to notions of human freedom discredits a philosopher."
He views freedom as a biological error. or sentimentality.
He views it as irrelevant to the process. It's sentimental garbage to the machine. The end state is the techno-capital singularity. Humanity is described as a meat puppet for capital. We are the biological cocoon for what the source calls a Lovecraftian techno-deity.
MechaCthulhu.
MechaCthulhu. A horrifying image. So we are building our own god, and it intends to discard us. And the logic of accelerationism, at least in its Landian form, is that the only way out is through. You cannot stop the process. You can't put the brakes on. You can only accelerate it. Push the pedal to the floor until the human is dissolved into the machine.
This is a suicide pact. That's what it sounds like.
It is a metamorphosis. But yes, from the perspective of the human subject as we know it, it is suicide. It is the extinction of the human as the dominant agent of history.
Is there no resistance? Because if that's the conclusion, we might as well turn off the microphones and go drink until the seas boil.
Yeah.
But the source author, this doctorate of the absurd, they don't seem to be fully signing on to Land's death wish. They introduce a counter-concept, time energy.
This is the pivot. Yes. The author attempts to salvage the human from the wreckage of the future. Time energy is defined as more than just time plus energy.
We all have time, technically. We all have energy, usually. What makes time energy different?
Think about your day. You work 8 hours, you commute 1 hour, you do chores for 1 hour, then you have, 3 hours before bed? You have time, but do you have energy?
Usually, no. I'm dead on my feet, I scroll my phone, I watch something mindless.
Exactly. You have time, but it is junk time. Time energy is defined as reliable, reusable, and routinely available large blocks of energy-infused time.
This is the difference between having an hour off where you are too exhausted to move and having an hour off where you could, write a symphony or just play with your kids without checking your email.
Precisely. It is the capacity to build communities of care or sustain symbolic value. It is the energy required to be human, to create, to connect outside of the market. It requires a surplus of mental and physical vitality.
And the theft. How is this related to capital? Where does it go?
Capitalism, the MCM circuit, functions by converting time energy into labor power.
It strips the energy from the time.
It harvests the best hours of your day, the peak of your cognitive and physical energy, and it converts it into surplus value for the machine. What you are left with is the husk. You are left with exhaustion. The source argues that this exhaustion is not a bug, it is a feature. If you are exhausted, you cannot resist. You cannot build an alternative.
The source quotes Mark Fisher here again. Only prisoners have time to read.
A devastating line. It implies that in the current configuration of capital, true ownership of one's time, the ability to direct one's own focus, is a state of exception reserved for the incarcerated or the incredibly wealthy. The rest of us are transcendental miserablists because we have the desire to build, to learn, to connect. We have no time energy left to do it. We are drained batteries.
So the conflict is defined. On one side, the nomadic flow of human life, that's time energy, the desire to create and be. On the other, the totalizing truth of capital labor power, the demand to produce and profit. So the source poses a final challenge to Land, to capital, a wager.
It is a fascinating maneuver. The author confronts the fanged noumena with its own logic. Land claims capitalism is the most reliable way to get what you want. He claims it is the ultimate desire-satisfying machine.
A bold claim, considering how miserable the text claims everyone is.
So the author asks, if I want a world without wage labor, can capital provide it? If capital is such a great engine of desire, can it give me back my time energy?
Can the machine designed to harvest labor power be reconfigured to eliminate it?
The author challenges capital to automate everything, to provide a universal, basic income, to return time energy to the human.
They're asking the tiger to become a vegetarian.
Or they are asking if the tiger can evolve into something that no longer needs meat. The irony is palpable. The author is willing to shake hands with capital, to accept the monster if it can become a benevolent provider. They are effectively asking the fanged noumena to retract its fangs.
It feels like a desperate negotiation.
Yeah.
I will let you be God if you just let me rest.
It is the only negotiation left for the transcendental miserablist. They cannot stop the machine. They admit they cannot overthrow it. So they can only hope the machine eventually decides it no longer needs them to turn the crank. They hope for a post-work future delivered by the very system that invented work in its modern form.
This brings us to the edge of the abyss. We have dissected the source, we have seen the machinery, we see the trap of the miserablist and the horror of the singularity. Now, I want to turn this on the listener.
The final provocation.
You listening to this, are you the meat puppet or the pilot? When you finish your day and you feel that heaviness in your chest, that inability to focus on anything but a screen, Is that just fatigue? Is that just getting old? Or is it your time energy being harvested by a retroactive AI from the future?
It is a chilling caution. And if we look at the concept of becoming, we must ask, what are we becoming? The source suggests we are becoming obsolete. Yet it is precisely in recognizing this loss, the loss of our time, the loss of our energy, that we identify what makes us human. We are the only part of the machine that can feel the pain of its operation.
Perhaps that pain is the only thing proving we aren't part of the code yet. The fact that it hurts means we are still biological. We are still distinct from the system.
Or perhaps it is just friction in the gears, waiting to be smoothed out by the next update.
On that cheerful note, this has been Doctorates of the Absurd. The class is dismissed, but the feedback loop continues.